Good morning and welcome to my morning market wrap. I'm Greg McKenna and it's Tuesday the 3rd of November 2015. Melbourne Cup Day here in Australia. That means Melbourne's off. They have a public holiday for a race. I know that sounds strange, but the rest of the country, it's an unofficial public holiday anyway. So I'll come to the Melbourne Cup in a sec, but quick trip around the grounds. Overnight, stocks were much higher. Some solid bounces we saw in the S&P, which closed at 2104, just above that 2100 level we've been talking about for a while. That's a good sign from a technical point of view. I had thought, and it was under a little bit of pressure early, but it's rallied, so it's getting into that zone that might question my my idea that the market is starting to get a bit toppy. Certainly the DAX is getting close as well, but the DAX is about 100 points or 1% away from some serious resistance over there in Frankfurt. So we'll talk about that in a sec. The Dow is up 0.94%. London's going nowhere, hasn't gone anywhere for a while now. It continues to lag, and its market was flat. But as I mentioned, in Germany, the market was up close to 1%. In Paris, it was up about 0.4%. It's no real surprise, I guess. I'll just bring up the DAX chart. It's no real surprise, I guess, that the DAX has been a solid performer. You know, it was the weakest of all the major markets when we had that acute period of weakness back in August, and it got down to a low around 9,000. And basically, when it was falling, I was saying it was going to go to 9,000. That was just a 2-point trend line. Now it's a sort of 4 or 5-point trend line. So theoretically still in an uptrend, but this shorter down period comes in around 11. So that's 1108. Let's just have a look. It's 11.1. I had it at 11.101 in my Go Markets report this morning. That says 11.114. But on a weekly basis, it looks like it wants to continue to rally. On the dailies, however, you know, you've got it really looking toppish, and there's the 200-day moving average. Can it break through? If it does and it gets through there, it could really roar. But we'll have to wait and see. From my point of view, for the moment, I'll be fading in front of the line and trading it unless or until it breaks. What happened there with the DAX and the S&P? We'll just quickly look at the S&P. This is the S&P daily. That's a big range. You know, you've got a higher high, and it's an outside day. A higher high and a lower low than the previous day. And what does that tell you? That's a pretty bullish sign. The bears have had a crack at it, the bulls have had a crack at it, and it's closed almost outside the top of the previous day's range. So you look at that and you say, well, Greg, you've been saying that you thought it was going to come back into this support zone. It hasn't done that yet. So from my point of view, I'm still looking for the top. Perhaps it's not in. And I'm just going to go with this price action until it does. In terms of the Aussie market, which had a shock yesterday, it was down 70 odd points. You know, the banks got smashed more than 2%. We've got iron ore belted last night down more than 2%, depending on whether you look at it in Dalian exchange or in US futures trade. But what we saw, this is the recent price action. What we saw was a let's just call that the little recent uptrend. What we saw was the support came out at the 50% Fibo level right there, and it's bounced back in. Don't forget, this is Go Markets, or MT4 I should say, futures and cash. So it's not exactly the same as the physical market, but you've seen a pretty good bounce there. We'll wait and see how it goes today. It should open up stronger. If it doesn't, it's going to tell you a lot about the market. But don't forget, Melbourne's out. You know, we could see it back up here at 53.35, something like that. I doubt it. If it does, I'll be selling it because it reminds me very much of the euro. You know, the euro, you know, rallied up, you know, that kind of thing, and then we had these down moves. It's not for me a market that I'm overly bullish on, which potentially means that I've got a bit of a blind spot. Right. Coming back to the overnight price action. So iron ore's down, gold's down, forex market's doing nothing. We're just waiting. There's no data out today. The data that we saw last night was that the PMIs, manufacturing PMIs in the US and in Europe were actually better than expected. And whereas in China yesterday we saw that the PMI was still in the contraction zone, or although contracting less than it has been for a while, the fact that in Europe and the US that manufacturing actually beat expectations was quite a good sign. Now, let's not talk about what the impact of that on Mario Draghi's promise of more stimulus is, and potentially what that means for stocks. And let's not talk about what that implies about the Fed tightening. But the reality is that both those things point to some difficulties for the markets. One, the ECB might find it difficult to deliver if the data print's okay. And two, the Fed won't have a choice but to hike if we get a strong non-farm payrolls on Friday night. So keep watching those. But for the moment, the bulls have it. Sell-offs are being bought. I'm still looking for a top, though. That's the way the price action looks to me. Now, turning to the Melbourne Cup, which is the other big thing. Now let's talk about the RBA first. The RBA is out at 2:30 today before the Melbourne Cup. What I'd say is I saw Paul Bloxham, who's HSBC's chief economist, on TV this morning. He said he thinks on the balance of probabilities they go. I think on the balance of probabilities they won't. Two reasons is I think the domestic, I really agree with the National Australia Bank. So if you have a look at my feed on Business Insider yesterday afternoon, I put up a post, 2 charts showing why the RBA shouldn't cut. I've repeated that in this morning's 20 seconds guide for traders as well. Key for me is that the domestic economy is healing. There's nothing they can do about the mining economy, so I agree with the NAB there. And they risk reigniting property, those kind of things, at 1 3/4%. You know, there's not a lot of aggregate demand as we're seeing in the inflation data, or it's not as strong as I thought it might have been. So that does give me pause. But I think it's too early for the RBA to go yet. And as cynical as this might sound, folks, they haven't leaked it to anybody. So we haven't read from Terry McCrann or, you know, somebody in the SMH or something like that. Certainly haven't leaked it to me or any of my colleagues at Business Insider. And it would be a bit of a shock for markets if they cut today, particularly with the Aussie down at 71.40. Unless, of course, they want it down at 69 cents. But it's pretty clear to me that the Aussie dollar is doing its job. Now, that doesn't mean that come February or March next year that they won't need to ease. Bloxham would argue, HSBC, that if that's the case, that they might need to ease next year, then they should ease now. That does kind of fit with Glenn Stevens' modus operandi, but it's not clear that they need to ease yet. It's not clear how the world's going to evolve. And I think that they've got precious bullets and they will spend them wisely. So I'm not expecting a rate cut today. In terms of the Melbourne Cup, run at 3 o'clock, I've had a stab. I've had a bit of a statistical walk through history. And this is the 3rd year in a row that I've done that. I've gone for preferment this year. Have a look at why over at Business Insider, and you'll see why. Last couple of years I've managed to get it right. I got Fiorente in 2013 when I first started this, and then I've gone completely blank on who won last year. Protectionist, of course, protectionist. But let me tell you a quick story. In 2008, Big Brown was going for the Triple Crown in the US. It had won the first 2 races. It was a short price favourite for the 3rd. But what people hadn't done is they hadn't looked at the statistics and the statistics that underpinned it in the position it was relative to other horses that had tried to win the Triple Crown. It came stone motherless last in the Belmont, which is the 3rd. Unlike a horse this year, which was American Pharaoh, that not only won the Triple Crown but extended it one more by winning the Breeders' Cup as well. So Big Brown or American Pharaoh, who knows? But preferment to me looks my pick in what is a very wide and open race. But if you want to have a look at Business Insider. It's on my stream or it's probably on the front page somewhere. Anyway, it's a very quiet day. Other than that, Japan's out for Culture Day. It should be relatively quiet. we get back into services PMIs tomorrow and some other data, retail sales, that sort of thing in Australia. But for now, enjoy the mini holiday in Australia, trade those levels, and have fun. That's it for me. I'm Greg McKenna. You can find me on Twitter at Gregory McKenna. You can find me at Business Insider, and you can find me at my own website, gregmckenna.com.au. Have a great day. Good punting. Bye for now.